What's up, guys? How are you? Co here from Revolution and the Rake magazine. So we are working this week on explaining the initiative of our charity auction. Initially, it was called the Revolution Oddball Charity Auction. Oddball referring to kind of unique and interesting watches, a lot of prototypes coming from different factories and from ourselves as well. We've since changed it up because my other magazine, The Rake, wanted to get involved. So we're just going to call it the Revolution under Rake COVID Solidarity Charity Auction. But one of the great experiences I had after we first announced this last week was I had a really cool collector reach out to me through Instagram. His name is Vaughn Pierce, and he goes by the Instagram handle Hands, Faces, and Cases, if I'm not mistaken, right? So it's hands, full stop, faces, full stop, and then cases. And you can check him out and check out his really cool collection. But we have him here with us today. And what was really cool was he reached out and said that he loved the initiative and he wanted to donate something. So before we announce what that watch is, I want to first introduce you guys to Vaughn Pierce. So Vaughn, how are you, brother?
I'm very well. It's a pleasure to be able to join you. I'm sitting in Sydney right now in lockdown, so this is not my normal office. I'm sitting in a nice little atrium at a friend's house and looking forward to having a chat. So thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you, brother. And you know, the whole idea behind this charity auction was is that we're all kind of in this together, you know. And I think that for those of us who have the privilege and the pleasure of living in a first world country like Australia, like Singapore, like the United States or the UK, you know, we've clearly been through a lot. In some countries, certainly more than others, if you take, for example, the United States. But we're starting to now see our economies restart. We're starting to see the countries reopen. But, you know, at the same time, if you look around the world, you see what's going on in South Africa, you see what's going on in Brazil, for example. And I think that it's a very important lesson to us all that we're all kind of involved in this together, right? And the whole idea behind this auction was to try to raise some money to just direct those funds at wherever in the world we're being affected the most. So I know you're kind of an international guy as well. You know, you're clearly Australian and you're in Sydney at the moment, but you also spend most of your time in a different part of the world.
Yep, I certainly do. I'm involved in a business in Vietnam, and I travel between Australia and Vietnam quite frequently. And so I'm very well aware of, you know, different cultures and countries, particularly around the Asia Pacific Rim. And, you know, I tend to agree that, you know, in places like Australia and Singapore, where we've got a great deal of privilege and great healthcare and all of those good things, there are certainly neighbours, you know, near and far that don't enjoy all of the services and systems that we do. And I guess one of the dangers I think we face as well is that, you know, potentially there is a second wave, and the second wave, you know, in history has been more devastating, particularly with like the Spanish flu. So who knows what happens, and, you know, maybe some of us will be complacent after getting through, you know, the first round, whatever we're going to call it, and who knows what happens in the second round. So, you know, I was actually quite inspired by your idea of putting up, you know, items for auction and creating a sense of solidarity. And felt that maybe I shouldn't just sit back and press the like button, and maybe I should do something a little more significant.
That's really amazing, man. Thank you so much. So maybe without further ado, we can announce the watch that you're going to be donating. This is a limited edition watch that was created by Baltic, which is a really cool company that was founded in 2017 by some very cool French dudes that we know. And to create great watches that are inspired by kind of the golden age of vintage watchmaking from the 20s to the 50s. And they also wanted to make watchmaking accessible to the average guy, you know? And so the idea that you can buy an amazing watch for $400 or starting at $400 I think that's really cool. And then they did this collaboration with Worn & Wound, which is a great website that was founded in 2011, which also kind of focuses on value proposition watches with the idea of making making relevant to everyone, right? Tell us why you like this watch in particular, why you bought it, and you know, what it means to you.
This is a crazy story. So it's 2 a.m. I wake up, can't sleep. Not unusual, I guess, when, you know, you're running a business or trying to run a business in a very difficult time. And short story, I went onto Instagram and checked out what was going on, and I saw this photo pop up from Worn & Wound and jumped on and was one of the lucky ones. I was really, I guess, drawn to the aesthetic. I really like the appeal of the dial, the sector dial, the contrast that we see with the different parts of the dial, and perfect size case. And I knew the product well. I've got both my son and I have Baltic aquascafs, and we really enjoy that product. So I was really amazed that when I clicked the go button, it said yes and filled out the cart and did the job. So the colour scheme, salmon. I mean, it's the hottest colour in town right now, I think. So I've certainly had a lot of people contact me via the IG account and say, would you like to sell it to me? So clearly, it's a very interesting watch and in demand at the moment. So it's
Awesome.
kind of an honour to be able to throw it and give it a second life and see what happens.
And you've got a Holton Ridge as well. So tell me a little bit about how you discovered Holton Ridge.
I used to, how did I find it? There's a channel called, I think it's called the Watch With Us channel. I know Spanish Rob's involved in it, and I saw he did an interview with this guy on the streets of Amsterdam, I'm pretty sure it was, and it was probably around a year ago, might be more, maybe less. But I just saw this fairly scratchy sort of iPhone interview going on over a beer in the streets of Amsterdam, and Michael, being the eccentric kind of guy that he is, was quite enthused by what he had to offer, and it was really a rough video. And apologies if I've offended whoever was involved in that. But I decided to track Michael down, and after multiple emails and DMs and whatever, I actually had the great pleasure of meeting him in Delft in January, and picking up this raw ornament, which is a really very unique and I think wonderfully different watch that we see emerging from a fairly talented guy. I think he's got a lot to offer the industry.
This is such a cool watch, right? And I dig, first of all, and I recently kind of discovered it like yourself. And the moment I saw it, I just was like, wow, I really love the design of it as well. I mean, for me, it's such an interesting original design. And I'm a big lug guy, right? And I love the skeletonized lugs. It's interesting. How do you make that junction between a round case and sort of like, and shaped lugs? And he did it in a way that's just so interesting and unique. And there's just such intricate kind of skeletonization going on. And then when I found out that the watch is 3D printed, it kind of made sense to me how he was able to do it. And I know that was appealing to you as well.
Absolutely. I think the design, coming from an engineering background, it was incredible to see, these hollow lugs and the inscription on the ends of the case and on the side of the case. And again, in the raw, what we're looking at on the screen now is the ornament. If you go to the raw ornament, there's actually an added dimension where the lugs actually come on and hug the bezel, and they give it an even more, I think, impactful aesthetic. So you can see there, you just touched on how the 3 dimensions have actually got Holton Ricks written on the side of the case, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, I really dig the raw ornament. I'm just going to bring that picture up.
That's so cool. Yeah, the raw ornament, it's further down in their list, I think. There you go. See how the lugs come up and they grab a hold of the top of the bezel there, and the contrast between the high polished edges of that lug and then obviously the 3D printed case still with that very speckled and very like cast iron style finish there. That aesthetic, it just grabbed me from that scratchy video, and I just wanted to find out more about it and of course learn who designed it and how and why, and the whole idea of 3D printing something like this. I think it's a great tension because there's a very rich vintage aesthetic here in combination with a very 21st century engineering concept. So I love it. It's very, very unique and different and very practical, particularly the raw, because it's not so prone to getting scratches either.
Absolutely. So Vaughn, where'd you get your beads of rice bracelet from?
That is a stave. I'm sure it's a stave bracelet. So I've got it on today. So I think that's what we're talking about. The beads of rice. It's a German stave, 20 mil.
it looks so cool on that raw ornament, you know. And I
Yeah,
remember, yeah, you're the first guy I've ever seen putting that sort of beads of rice bracelet on there. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I
yeah.
love that. That's such a cool aesthetic.
Well,
And I'm
you should pull out the Revolution beads of rice and get it on there and see how that
well,
goes.
between us, we are doing a special edition of a raw ornament with
Oh,
Holton Ridge, and it's going to
really?
have yeah, it's going to have applied Brigade numerals on it. Uh,
Wow.
and we're gonna put that on the beads of rice. So I thought that, but we got that idea from you.
That is super cool. Okay, so no doubt we'll hear more about that somewhere
Of
along the
course.
line.
Well, as soon as the
Oh,
renderings are done, we'll send it over to you.
oh, that,
Okay, so let's
yeah,
cheers. So let's go back to the Baltic, if you don't mind, because this actually it's one of those watches that I love it when people say they break the internet. But this was launched, and it came in a bicompact chrono version, and it came in
yeah,
this time only version as well. And the time only version is the one that we're talking about, and that's a really cool watch. So if you look at it, you can see that the center of the watch has this sort of beautiful sandblasted frosted finish, and then that finish comes back in the minutes/seconds track in the perimeter. And then underneath the indexes, these beautifully stylized Arabic indexes, you have a really lovely circular brushing. So what I really dug about this watch was Baltic, like they absolutely smashed it. Like this is one of the best design watches I've seen in years, regardless of price point, you know?
yeah. Look, I couldn't agree more, and I think you know there's a very I think perfectly vintage inspired salmon there. The contrast with the case, the silver, obviously polished stainless finish there, and the accent that the hands draw from the case onto the dial, you know, it's so readable, it's so classic in its layout. And then you realise it's a sub $1,000 price point, and you just go, hang on a minute, is this real? And,
Well, so look at the case and look at that bezel, right? Like that basically, these watches, they look like the old Longines Traiton case, right?
yeah,
So, and that's the thing, what's so cool about them. It's like they have, you know, it's all period correct,
yes,
vintage styling cues that they've all kind of, they've assembled together. So for those of you guys who may not be aware of it, Longines has a Traitanque case, which is a step case, which is noted. This bezel is actually very characteristic of them. And what was cool about these watches is they were water resistant, so they were worn a lot by as kind of sporty watches as well, and by the military community. And those, in combination with the scientific or sector dial, which is what we see on this bicompacts here, those are the watches that everyone wants is chasing in the vintage market. Right? It's cool they've
and
done
look
it.
at the lugs. If you look at how they've done that brushed finish on the lug,
Yeah.
it's a concentric circle mirroring the numeral track, and you know that level of detail it's you know quite remarkable in a watch of this price point, and it just enhances the aesthetic. And what can you say? It's a brilliantly executed design. It really is.
That's an amazing like observation, because you're right, like no one does that. So if you look, guys, look here, if you look at the where the Arabic indexes are underneath it, you'll see a circular brushing finish for the dial, right? And what Vaughn was referring to is that brushing is echoed in the brushing on the lugs as well, which no one does, right? And it's just such a beautiful and intelligent like attention to detail, like this great touch that sets this watch apart. So, you know, bravo, man. Juan, you
Yeah.
were mentioning that you collect watches along with your son. So you guys kind of do that together, or?
Yeah, so I've got two boys, two young men actually. They're both you know they're both independent young men of this world, and it's certainly a commonality we have. We have several, but you know we have an open watch box around the place where we kind of drop off and pick up, and you know sometimes I have to go into the bedside dresser and retrieve a few and do whatever. But it's certainly been a great connection point for us, sharing ideas, you know, arguing about good and bad. And, you know, one of the more recent arguments was around the raw ornament and whether or not it should be complemented or not by beads of rice. So,
That's cool.
so, but it's been really great. And I think my dad wasn't a great watch collector, but he had three significant watches in his life, and I have two of those. And you know, I valued the fact that he bought me my first watch when I was quite young, and he bought a Swiss Oris from the mid-70s, mechanical movement, and that, of course, was the trigger point for a lifelong interest that I've maintained, and I've really enjoyed sharing it with my lads. Yeah, it's been good.
Amazing, man. It's a really wonderful thing to be able to share with your family as well.
Yes.
Do you guys all have the same taste in watches, or does it kind of differ a little bit?
It's scary. So it's scary to the point that when my eldest was turning 21, I said to him, "Look, I want to make this significant, and I want to buy you a watch, and I don't want to, in a sense, give you a watch because that's what my dad did, and I didn't really appreciate what he did, but the gesture was amazing. The choice wasn't going to be my choice. So I went through seriously an 8-9 month long process with my eldest to get to a decision about what he wanted, and it was incredible that I would do screenshots and send him something, and he'd do screenshots and send me something, and we would land at the same point for the same reason on 2 or 3 occasions, which was, you know, what's going on with DNA? I don't know, but it is quite incredible that you can have such, you know, generationally shared passions for the same aspects of a watch, and that's been very interesting to learn.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
If you don't mind my asking, what was the watch that he selected for his 21st birthday?
So a lot of people go, "What?" I don't believe it. It's a Dwiss watch. The exact model number I don't recall, but it's got a Roman numeral and a very unique hour and minute hand, very odd shape. And for me, it's incredibly contemporary. I like the aspects of the watch, and it's going to be an extremely memorable watch for him. And he wanted it because it was a 1 of 200, I'm thinking, or might have been 1 of 199. It's a big watch, 44 mil, not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but all the things he liked about it were great points that I appreciated his perspective. And he loves it. He really loves it. So he has 2 or 3 others, and that one, you know, he'll always have as his 21st watch. And it wasn't the gold Rolex, but it's what he wanted. So that's what he got.
That's really cool. I love the fact that you guys are probably sitting around the table and having this conversation about watches and movements and sizes and proportions and, you know, historical moments and aesthetics. You know, that's amazing.
You know, it's the old man and the new generation, and you see where it's nice to see where the contrasts are as well.
That's really cool. And for you, what is the one watch that you don't have that you're like, that's something I'd like to work towards one day?
The one watch I don't have, very, very difficult. I'm going to say 2.
Okay.
I'm very fortunate, but there's a new watch in the wind at Rake, which is a 3D case. You've probably seen some prototyping for it. I'm really interested in that in a precious metal. The design would have to change because the current design wouldn't fit a gold watch. Some aspects of the case are too thin, but that case I think is extraordinary. I'd love to see that, at some point in time. And I think there's a couple of, there is one other, and it's really a vintage Vacheron Constantin. It's kind of what would you call it? It's 36 millimeter, a big sort of acrylic crystal, Roman numerals, very thin gold stick hands on a kind of a polished opal sort of white dial. They're not, I don't know the exact model number, I shouldn't recall it, but that watch I've seen 2 or 3 times in some antique websites, and it's very, very appealing. Something from that 1940s, 1950s. Yeah, nice. Very nice. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, man. Thank you again so much for this donation. You're an awesome guy, and I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing how it all goes, and good luck with it. And I hope lots of people get involved at all different levels of the industry and raise some money for this very worthy cause that you put up to it.
Thank you, sir. And please stay in touch, and we'll be following you on Instagram.
Take care. All the best.
Bye.